On to other news, while South Africa has seen increasing enrolment in basic and tertiary education, 2023 has shown that there are still significant challenges in the quality of educational achievement, with recent international benchmark assessments showing that 80% of South African 10-year-olds are unable to read for meaning. As the South African educational system failing our youth, we speak to Ari Katz, Boston Online Home Education representative. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Chipisa, and thank you for inviting me.
Let's start with the insights into the current youth unemployment trends in South Africa. What do they tell us, and particularly with regards to our pedagogical influence and vision?
So it is quite interesting, actually. If you look at the unemployment statistics, we can see that of the unemployment population, those who do not have a matric, 51% of them are unemployed, whereas those who have a matric, only 38% are unemployed, and those with the tertiary education, 7% are unemployed. So clearly, the more educated our youth are, the greater their opportunity is to gain employment. However, there's a worrying trend. If there was an interesting article in the Financial Mail recently where they talk about intergenerational educational mobility. And if we look at it, we can see that kids who were born in the 70s and 80s are generally far more educated than their parents. Yet we have a situation where 2/3 of youth in South Africa are unemployed. And so the real question is, what is failing in our education system that despite the fact that we do have intergenerational educational mobility, with the youth being far more educated than their parents, we still have 2/3 of youth being unemployed. And the real question is why.
So I'm going to continue asking you why, based on the research that you've been doing, the surveys, through not only the young people you come into interaction with. I was just reading a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago, about the funding, to whom it goes to, and the people who are awarded. NSFAS, for instance, the criticism was, if you look at the people who are awarded, it's for instance, say, TVET programs that deal with already oversaturated areas, such as tourism, things that are not necessarily worthy to the economy if we are looking to re-industrialize and a part of that, vision.
So I think a big part of it is not only the allocation of funding, because if you think about it, in South Africa, we spend 6.5% of our GDP on education, whereas in the average in other countries in the world is just over 3%. So we're spending a huge amount of money. The question is, are we spending it wisely? Not only in terms of allocation to programs, but in terms of the pedagogical underlying methodology of teaching. Are we teaching the skills of the future, which are things like critical thinking skills, cognitive development skills, as opposed to rote learning, for example? So if you look at, for example, the TIMSS study on mathematics, where we score pretty poorly, one of the reasons for that is because our methodology of teaching is more based on rote learning and as opposed to application, interpretation, etc. And so I think there needs to be much greater emphasis on cognitive development as opposed to rote learning, where we focus more on higher order thinking, critical thinking, teaching our learners to be flexible for the future world of the digital economy and the knowledge-based economy that we're entering into.
Are we applying that money back into skills training as well? Because if we're saying 80% of 10-year-olds are unable to read for understanding, does it mean that even though we have curriculum changes, we are not ensuring that the teachers are being brought along?
Yes, I think what you're quoting is actually the PRILS study, the Progress in International Literacy, where it indicated that 81% of learners grades of 10 years old are unable to read for meaning. So it's not just a question of reading, but it's a question of reading for meaning. And clearly, if they're not able to read for meaning, they have no chance of progress into further education. What's interesting actually regarding the funding is that if you compare that to Brazil, for example, which is a country that's very similar to South Africa in terms of huge inequality, a similar GDP per capita, in the PRILS study, Brazil scored 39% versus our 81%. So clearly we're doing something wrong along those lines. What's interesting though is prior to COVID, South Africa was actually making progress, and we had gone from a PRILS study in 2006, which showed that 87% of our learners could not read for meaning, and in 2016, 78%, that number changed from 87 to 78%. So we had progressed. However, the COVID period knocked us back, and we're now at 81% again. What's further interesting about the COVID period is where they measured it, fee-paying schools versus non-fee-paying schools. Fee-paying schools did not actually decrease in their literacy levels, whereas the non-fee-paying schools did decrease, which suggests that government have not put enough emphasis into redressing the inequalities that happened during COVID to fix the non-fee-paying schools to be equivalent to their fee-paying schools.
I mean, you speak about COVID. I think it's the Department of Basic Education and even to a point higher education that have spoken about that there have been concerted efforts at curriculum reform. So when we talk about online learning, SATU itself has said that they have realized the chasm in pedagogical approach and the need to align themselves with future skills training. So are you saying that is not happening or is not happening at a satisfactory level?
So I think first up, we need to embrace online learning far more than we have. And the main reason for that is because it provides learners so many more opportunities, but it also provides educators the opportunity through data to actually measure effectively performance, to create personalized learning pathways, and to actually provide the necessary interventions. So I think the one thing that we have failed in, I don't think that we've embraced online learning sufficiently. And particularly, as I said before, in developing cognitive skills. And there are many, many opportunities using online learning to develop these cognitive skills and to measure the progress of learners over a period of time.
Ari Katz, thank you so much for speaking to us. He is the Boston Online Home Education representative.